Welcome to the Wisdom of Show. I'm your host, Simon Bowen, and every week I'm speaking to the world's greatest leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs about complex issues and impactful leadership. Join us in the Renaissance of Wisdom. Well, welcome to the Wisdom of Alice Barbery. Alice is the CEO of Universal Store, a fashion store primarily aimed at the youth market, but with some really interesting stories behind it. I'll get into those in a minute. But the purpose of this show is to really expand thinking about leadership and stewardship. We live in an increasingly superficial world, and we have a great need in the world today for higher levels of leadership politically, socially, economically, militarily around the world. And we have a younger generation of leaders coming through, and we should be wondering what the examples are like that the older leaders in place today are actually setting for them. And if business is one of the most powerful forces for good on the planet, how can we make sure that the experiences people have as they interact with businesses worldwide demonstrate to them that business is actually that force for good? And that's why Alice is my guest today. As you'll see as we start to unpack this, Alice has had a career in retail with a momentary diversion into aviation, started in retail in the United Kingdom, worked through multiple roles in sales and operations and at the CEO level, with about 5 years with Virgin Blue in Australia, and now the CEO at Universal Store, where she's been for about 14 years. And as we unpack some of the value she brings to the story for that company and some of the alignment that Universal Store has around important issues, you'll start to understand why I really want people to experience what a contemporary business in the world could really stand for today. So Alice, welcome. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. My pleasure.
It really is my pleasure. So, there's a, if someone goes to your LinkedIn bio, it's not a typical bio, because it's really talking about what people should be able to expect from a business and what a business should be able to do for people. And I'm particularly interested in your focus on the solution to almost every problem is people, which might be out of step in an AI-driven world today. Everyone's losing their minds over AI, and AI is a great tool. There'll be some human cost for that as well, but people are the solution to every problem. And a part of the role of the leader is to create an environment. This wording, I want to make sure I read this because I think it's pretty critical. Creating an environment that empowers individuals to outperform their own expectations, which is kind of interesting. I mean, that is a very specific identification there. So where do you think that set of motivations and values have come from that have you as an executive with this very purpose-driven and meaningfully driven approach to business? Where did they come from? Have you identified that?
Oh, I think you'd have to go all the way back to your childhood. And my father was a social justice warrior ever since I can remember. I was actually born in the US, and my original roles were I was the Estee Lauder and the Gap when I was at university, and then went to the UK with the Gap, as you highlighted. But my dad always said, every time you take a step up, you put your hand down and bring someone with you. He was a young boy who was orphaned, and got to go to university because one of his teachers paid for his first year at uni, and then he got scholarship from there, and he became a federal judge in the US. So he trained me to not look at any individual person and not see potential. And when I would work in environments and I would see organizations missing the opportunity to ignite potential in people, particularly in retail, because it's a catchment place for creative, interesting young people that lack direction and lack clarity of direction. And if you can provide a safe and encouraging workplace where people can exceed the expectations of maybe their home life or of their peer set, And maybe they don't think that there's, oh, I could never be a manager, I could never be an area manager, I could never be a CEO. If you can help ignite and spark some of that opportunity within their own mindset to overcome the obstacles that life has given them, then isn't that a noble way of creating loyalty as well? One of the sayings I have is that you pay for backs, but you win hearts and minds. And if you want to get discretionary effort from people, they've got to buy in at a level beyond the paycheck.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you talk about, isn't that a noble thing to do? I think free enterprise is one of the most powerful forces we've got on the planet. It's a noble activity if the right people are leading it, which means sales should be the most noble thing we do, because sales is what makes business sustainable as opposed to a charity and things like that. But you said something really interesting in the middle of that. Retail is a catchment place for creative young people who don't know what they want to do or where they're going.
I can get a job in a shop, or I can get a job at a restaurant. Like it's that kind of free entry, easy work to do while you figure out who you are and what you want to do next.
Yeah. That view is also not something that a lot of companies and company leaders actually take time to think through. So, we work with a lot of businesses worldwide, and that's the first time I've heard a business leader say, well, this is what our industry sector is. It's a catchment place for creative young people who haven't figured out where they want to go or what they want to do yet. That's a very interesting, is that something you've thought through yourself? Or
oh, sure. I mean, most of us get a job in retail while we're at university, or if you're not sure what to do, but you've got to put food on the table and a roof over your head, you can get a job in a shop. It's pretty easy to get entry for most people, not for everyone. And how we make that more inclusive is also part of the remit that we're facing into. So people with disability, people from Indigenous backgrounds, they're still struggling to find that opportunity. So that's on the table for us to look at how we do that better. But it's definitely, you don't have to, if you never get out of the office and you don't spend any time on the shop floor and you don't meet who's applying for the jobs, then you might be confused by that reality. But once you get to know the backstory of some of the kids that work for you, yes, you've got your university students who are on track, but you've also got a lot of other kids who are just trying out life for the first time, especially when you work with young people. But it's also a catchment place for women who've been involved in domestic violence and haven't worked for a long time and find themselves thrust back into the workplace. There's a lot of vulnerable people who will find work in a retail space, which is why I'm really passionate about keeping bricks and mortar alive.
It's an interesting perspective that you're bringing. If you think about, you said your father was a social justice lawyer and then a magistrate, and we've worked with numbers of people in the social justice arena in the US, and they are, public defenders and social justice advocates are quite passionate around what they do. One of them once said to me, the opposite of justice is not injustice. The opposite of justice is poverty, actually. And, you look at lawyers and doctors and engineers and things like that, you can typically say, these are the kinds of people that gravitate towards those careers and professions. But there's lots and lots of workplaces that are catchment places. And, people are so focused on, hiring the highest quality talent, but actually every industry becomes a catchment place for some kind of people. And a business should be able to work out how to get the most out of them and have them exceed their own expectations. That's really, really, really kind of pretty interesting. So the Universal Store has 4 primary targets that align very strongly with United Nations sustainability goals. And, if people go and look through the website, you have a lot of projects and intentional action around, cruelty-free, modern slavery-free. Like it's a fashion company, right? And we've all become aware of fast fashion and those sorts of things. What have the challenges been? Were there any in creating and maintaining the agenda to be so much more than a fashion company, you know, because there's real stuff in there, and the company's so much more than what it sells in this case.
So, well, yeah. And what do we sell? We sell self-esteem at the end of the day. That when you're selling, you know, fashion, particularly to young people, they want to fit in and stand out a little bit, but they really want to fit in and they want to belong and they want to feel confident and they're still learning who they are. And you know, dating is the top priority, in case anyone forgets what it's like to be a teen. Number one priority of all things in your young, you know, late teens, early 20s. So what they put on their bodies really probably matters to that age cohort more than most, or what shoes you've got on.
Yes.
So when I guess was pulling together the leadership team at Universal Store, and we've had the same team for a long time, everyone bought into our values, which are here to help, make it work, better than good, contribute, and care for everyone. And when you have people who are aligned in value and in purpose, and that, you know, by the way, we also give a lot of tough feedback, and we share feedback very fluidly within the organization. We leave our ego at the door and think about customer first. It was very easy when the awareness of the impact of our industry, you know, has on the planet and on people was becoming more and more, I guess, brought into the zeitgeist and the conversations. It was a very easy sell. You know, people were, we had no pushback. And it was actually one of the things in hiring a sustainability expert to join the team and build out the team. The biggest frustration most people had when we were interviewing was organizations wanted to have this department to tick a box, not to actually create change. And so the easiest thing for us was to go, no, we actually get this. And my board completely supports it. There is not anyone who works in this organization that isn't passionate about those pillars.
Where did it start? Who did it start with?
Gosh, I think our products team really were the ones who had the first initial awareness of, you know, of impact, and started questioning. Of course, it just started to bubble up. I think one of the best things the government did was say, if you're over a certain dollar amount, you must have a modern slavery statement. So they go, okay, we've got to really look into this at a deeper level. And as you start to learn more and you become more aware, you start to become more able to respond, which is how I like to think about responsibility. And what am I able to respond to, and what can we promise, and what can we work towards? But the entire team just jumped on board very smoothly. And so our sustainability team don't feel like they're fighting uphill. They know that it's a one team mentality.
How important do you think it was that you and the board, or you and the other executives in the board, showed real interest in this when the product team came through, right?
Huge. Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't got leaders, if you haven't got support from your leaders, you know, it's like carrying water in a bucket full of holes, isn't it? And look, I think working with young people, there's in order to keep them employed, because people talk about how quickly they move, if they don't have a level of autonomy in their work, the sense that they've got some scope to make decisions and to run with things, if it's just lip service, tell me what to do and I'll execute. Yeah, sure, there was a time in the 70s, 80s, and 90s where you could get away with that, but in modern day, people want to have a say in how they execute their work. And so this was just a natural fit. It kind of just, I was like, why haven't we been doing this all along? But we certainly have been leaders, because we're a retailer that has vertical product that we manufacture ourselves, design and make, but we also have a lot of third-party brands. So we had to go to some of our third-party brands and say, hey, we actually need this reporting. And they said, well, no one else is asking us for this. And we said, well, I don't care that they're not asking. We need to have it. We need to have it by this time. So they've recognized the need as well. And then the knock-on effect has been that their practices have improved. So it's got a ripple effect, which has been great.
And, you know, there are so many things that are possible to unpack in this. Two little directions I want to go in. You know, it's it's become a common conversation in today's world from older people about how entitled the younger generation are, and you know, we're a much tougher generation and everything else. And I have great faith in the young people that are coming through. We actually should always have faith in the younger people that are coming through, because they are also the future hope. But you are surrounded by young people in much larger numbers than most of us would be, and large chunks of your workforce are younger people. I suspect you have a different experience of and view of younger people than most. I'd love you to unpack
Oh,
where you
you,
see the young
how much
leadership of
time
the
have you
world
got?
coming. Oh, you can take
I've been
whatever
I've,
time.
I've been managing the same age group despite aging myself for, a long time. So I'm older than most people think I am. Uh, I don't know why. Good genes, perhaps.
Mhm.
But yes, my peer set can be very harsh, judge and judgmental. I think that the current young people that I work with now are the kindest, most embracing of diversity, the most generous, and some of the most decent generations that we've seen in a long time. They are more selfless, even though will always be selfish behaviors that happen, particularly before that frontal lobe closes at 25, right? So we're talking about people who are still operating in an completely formed, brain. We have social media, which is confused and conflicted every age group, but I am so pleased I didn't grow up with that distraction. And the entitlement aspect, if people feel that's the case, then look at the parents and look at the school set. I mean, when we started giving kids 12th place trophies and telling them that they didn't lose, there's no consequence to their life, then unfortunately some of these kids get jobs and they come to work late on a number of occasions and they get a written warning and they're devastated because no one in their 17 years has ever said to them, there's a consequence for behavior. And then we wonder why they're entitled. So they're leaving it up to business to almost teach the lesson of consequence, which, by the way, is also a pay rise and a promotion. That's consequence for behavior. It isn't always negative. So I find that we are actually teaching people that failure is acceptable, that it is, you have to create safe environments to make mistakes, take calculated risks, but that if you never fail at anything, then you're never trying to do anything. So yeah, I feel that we're being a little cruel. And I'll just say one other thing. Adolescence has only been around since the 1920s. It didn't exist prior to that. People were a certain age, but the idea of that suspended adulthood period never existed until about that time. And over the next 100 years, what we've seen is adolescence that suspended, because we're living longer, has stretched out. So now people are saying, oh, well, he's only 30. When I was a kid, by 30, you had your first house, 3 kids, or 2 kids. It's funny how we have, and then of course we judge that harshly when that is just the normal, I guess the norm that these parents and the way the education system's been structured, we've not made people learn how to be responsible, and then we blame them for it when it doesn't suit us.
Once again, you've said something interesting in the middle of that. I used to lecture at university, and a big chunk of university is not about what they learn. Part of the role of university is to grow young people up.
Yeah. My dad said to me, just to interrupt quickly, just go back to him. He said, I'm sending you to university to become a better person, not a better person than anyone else, but a better person than who went in.
Yeah. University is there to grow you up. And as is the first job a young person goes to. And so much of their what becomes their hardwired work ethic, can be laid down in that first job, right? And so, if you are an employer listening to this and you tend to hire people and it's their first job, if universities role partly is to grow people up. So is the first employment opportunities role,
Completely.
particularly if that foundation hasn't been laid down. And so, take those responsibilities really, really seriously, because, I find young people do care about things more than I did the things that a 17 and 18-year-old cares about today. I know what I was doing at 17 and
Yeah.
18, and it was nothing like that. I was just interested in sport and, cars and things like that. And I wasn't even aware of what was going on in the world, but they are so exposed to everything, and they do think about and care about a lot of things, really, really deeply. And you can either choose as an employer, to be a mentor and a sage, or you can choose to be a manager and a boss. And I suspect you get a different level of performance out of people based on the position you take. And, the mentor and the sage don't remove consequence for people. They actually have a much cleverer way of making those consequences appear. Whereas, the manager and the boss, is often using a harsh or passively aggressive, maybe even aggressive form of consequence. And the selfish gene doesn't go away when the frontal lobe closes over. We see demonstrated, don't we, in the news all the time, older selfish people who should know better. And so what behavior are they learning from everything they're seeing? So what if that workplace is the only place where they see high responsibility, deep thinking people? If you look at Universal Store, the message is so much deeper. It's not about fashion, it's about self-esteem. It's not about what a business does, at the bottom line. It's about what the business does at multiple bottom lines. It's sort of interesting. Can a business in today's world be wildly and outrageously successful, commercially and economically, in terms of shareholder value, and be wildly and outrageously successful in terms of things like DEI and the environment and the social responsibility agendas? Because a lot of business owners often see them, tick the DEI box, tick the environment. A lot of business owners see them as almost competing or mutually exclusive. Not many see them as powerfully intertwined and the opportunity that could come from them. I'm guessing you actually see the focus that Universal Store has on these significant agendas and issues that you address as actually being a superpower for the business, I'm guessing.
Oh, for sure.
I'd love to get you.
The authenticity and alignment is something that I think young people have a clearer lens to see through than perhaps generations previous. If they'll sniff out inauthenticity in a heartbeat, and nothing is less satisfying than not trusting, who you're working with and who you're working for. So you have to show up. So I think, businesses really need to think about the symbolism within their organizations. So, for instance, I refuse to have any assigned car parks. That's just this hierarchical, ridiculous notion in my mind that I get remunerated differently, but why do I deserve a car park that's got, CEO, CFO, whatever? If I'm particularly late, maybe I've gotten off a plane, maybe I've come off the red eye from Perth, and I get in and there isn't a car in the car park. That has happened, and I have to go around up the street. I'm tired, but so be it, because on the rare occasion that happens is nothing compared to the casual in the distribution center today who gets the best car park in the place today. Like, good on him. He was here first. Why shouldn't you? I mean, those sorts of things, being seen, being visible. So no lunch at your desk. Everybody has to eat in the lunchroom. It makes people sit with people that they don't normally sit with and have interesting conversations. And I'm out there. So if you think, oh, I'm too scared to make an appointment to talk to this person, but I can sit next to her at lunch and maybe ask a question. Just being visible and accessible, not having hierarchical symbolism in your organization that is pointless and is misaligned to the values that you have. I think those sorts of things are really important. And I don't think enough businesses think about, well, we say this, but what do I see? and what do other people see?
And there's no doubt that the marketplace is looking to buy from companies that demonstrate and symbolize those kinds of higher quality and more authentic levels of responsibility, if you like. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Four Horsemen, the study from Gottlieb, but the Four Horsemen of conflict, and one of them is contempt. So when you do a longitudinal study of relationships that last, and this was done, marriage relationships that lasted more than 15 years, the significant quality that existed in those that lasted more than 15 years was there was no contempt in the relationship.
Yeah.
And I've done work with organizations where I've challenged CEOs and executive teams. What if you just removed contempt from the organization? And their initial response is, we don't have contempt in our organization. Now, one of the examples I've actually used was, well, what do you call the executive team car park? And in this particular instance, this particular instance was a chemical factory, and the staff had to park in the streets, and parking in the streets was only 4 hours. So that meant they had to use their half-hour lunch break to move the car, right? What do you call the term blue collar? If it's not contemptuous, it means unionized, not motivated to help the organization and everything. What do you call, when you've got separate dining areas for the blue collar and white collar force, if that's not contemptuous? And every time I put this in front of people, like, oh, well, that's just HR. That little phrase is contempt. Oh, you know what finance are like. You've got to get a purchase order. That's contempt. And it's a very subtle thing, but once you start looking for it, and I, when young people say, I don't want to work 9 to 5 and everything else, they're being bombarded with contempt all the time in terms of potentially how we're thinking about them. So it's sort of interesting. And so you've got this philosophy of creating these environments where people can strive, to be better than their previous best, which clearly we know now comes from your father, who sent you to university to come out better than you went in. So we can see the breadcrumbs. But you also have this drive to surround yourself, with the best and the smartest people, and you probably don't know who they are while you're hiring them. Are there things that you do that actually cause them to gravitate towards you and towards the business, and you trust that what you've done brings the right people to you?
I think, we hear a lot about value alignment, but it is critical. I mean, you can work with some very talented people, but if they don't align to your values and they see people as a means to an end, and don't make smart decisions around the team and the health and well-being of the team, then they're not going to work here. They're not going to last. And I think we've attracted some extraordinarily talented people who have worked in some environments that were not aligned in that way. And once they come in, we've had people go, I've been here for 2 weeks. When is it going to happen? When is somebody going to complain? When are we going to have gossip? When is there going to be negativity? What's happening here? And, it takes them a while to kind of break out of what they're so used to. Then, we had a meeting and people said, look, I was really disappointed in, your team's output. That didn't align. We missed some targets because these things happen. And they go, wow, tell me more about that. And they're like, how can you have these open conversations? It's because we're not ever striving for perfection. We're striving for continuous improvement. And so if everyone's aligned on continuous improvement, then it takes your ego out of the equation and it becomes a group desire to achieve better than we've done before. So it's kind of, people either align to that or run for the door. And we have had a few people go, this is not for me. And, it's like, you talk about a marriage. I've been married 30 years this year. So I guess we've done okay on the contempt area there. But but it is like a marriage. Just because this is how we work doesn't mean it's right for everyone. And, we can kiss them on the head and wish them well to be successful someplace else. But if you're going to be here and you're going to, we talk about value add, not, or should I say cultural add, not cultural fit. This is what our culture is. How do you make us better? It's not just about fitting in, but it's about adding something.
Yeah. Well, if you're a manager and you're coming to work for Universal Store and you've grown up in an environment of, industrial age management thinking, this would be a very uncomfortable place to be. You know, we run, one of our core values as a company is kindness and complaint free. And, you know, we run, you know, I wear this kind of bracelet, and the idea is you run a complaint free challenge constantly. So it's a complaint if it comes out of your mouth and it brings someone down. And so, you know, you try to go 21 days without complaint. And if you complain, you've got to swap wrists and start your 21 days again. Now, it took me 8 months to get to my first 21 days, but it is quite the journey, I've got to say. Now, that does not mean that you don't tackle issues that come up. It just means you've got to do it in a kinder way. And it's a complaint if it brings people down. So, you know, in simpler terms, play the ball, not the person. And the example you gave, where there was a meeting and you talked this through, that's exactly an example of a complaint-free approach to let's tackle the issue, right? It's simple stuff often that makes this work, not the complex organizational change strategies and things like that, but it has to be led by the leaders. So when you kiss them on the head and let them go when people are not a fit, how do you protect that culture? Because when you have such a potent culture in place, and I don't know how many employees there are in the company, but you know, when there's a lot of people, you need to have a line of sight everywhere, because it doesn't take much to start to eat away at something.
Yeah, we've got about 80 in the office, and then a huge casual workforce that supports and part-time workforce that supports the distribution centers and stores. We've got 100 stores, average 2 full-timers plus part-time casual workforce that supports it. So it is a lot, but you can't protect it if it's only in the leader's hands. It has to be in a lot of people's hands, and a lot of people have to align. And we talk about spreading the red and not spreading the red, spreading the green, kind of what you talk about with complaint free. And you're right, it doesn't mean that you don't confront the issue, you just don't confront the person. And that shift in thinking is we're confronting the issue, the problem, the disappointment, the miss. We're not confronting the individual. The individual's got to be part of the solution if we're going to solve this. And people have to be open and willing to hear feedback. And if you're not willing to hear feedback, then you don't actually care about your own growth. So how it's delivered, there's a process to how we want to deliver it. But it's about the problem, not the person. But it has to be in everyone's hands, and particularly in the leadership team. And then every manager has to buy into that. And so annual leadership training is really important, so that we can make sure that the alignment that we have, that you run scripts in your head, and the scripts drive your behaviors, and your behaviors give you your results. So if you're getting bad results, what was you thinking in the first place? And when you start to train young store managers and thinking about, well, that's your model of the world, someone else has a different model of the world, how do you have that conversation to get curious about how do they see things before you push your agenda? But of course, there are agendas that we have to share, which are the values and the KPIs. They are shared. And the other thing is, whilst we're doing all of this wonderful just behavior, the only way that I've made a promise to everyone who signed a contract, and that's that they have a job here. So look to the left and look to the right. That's whose jobs we're saving. We made no redundancies during COVID. We've made no redundancies in the more recent, challenging times that we all had last year in industry, because we'll pull together and pick up extra work where we need to. And so that one team culture, that people feel that they have an impact on the culture, and they know that they do. So choose your impact carefully, as we do have an impact on the planet, and as we have an impact on our customers and our suppliers.
And obviously, if someone's choosing not to fit, then they don't get to stay, and that's real.
That's real.
That's an interesting phrase, that I've made a promise to anyone that signs a contract that they have a job here, because that really then leads us into the whole AI conversation. Now, AI is a phenomenally useful tool at the moment for humanity, but it has consequences. I'm not getting into the conversation about, is AI the the clear and present danger to humanity, because climate change will take us out before AI does if we don't actually get on top of that. But AI can cost jobs. AI is actually, technology tends to lift the level at which human labor ceases to be valuable.
Mm.
And sort of the industrial age did that. All of a sudden, handcrafted things were no longer valuable. We could do it faster.
Yeah.
And of course, AI is lifting the level where a whole lot of administrative work and things like that is no longer valuable, done by humans. I'm interested in, as a company, how you're navigating the whole AI space, because we have to be on the wagon and use it to stay competitive. But then there are real consequences that I think stewards of business will be thinking long and hard about, as opposed to a manager or just a leader of a business. How can I get the most out of this? I'm interested in, as a company, how are you navigating your way through AI, particularly given the culture and the promise you've got a job here?
So I've got a couple of thoughts about that. All tools are as good or bad as the person whose hand the tool is in, right? A knife in the hand of a murderer is very different to the chef. So is the knife good or bad? How's it being used?
Yeah.
What has worried me for a very long time, and I've spoken about this numerous every opportunity, is there's a significant portion of the population that can only operate at what I would call a level 1 processing capability. So your really basic level, because of physical, emotional, intellectual challenges that they might have, new to a country, don't speak language, etc. And they are transactional jobs, really physical, transactional kinds of jobs. And technology has been removing those transactional kinds of jobs for a very long time. Someone used to pump my petrol, someone used to pack my groceries. We keep getting rid of all of those sorts of, now you don't even have a checkout person. So as we've been continuing to get rid of that level 1 work, we've not created any opportunities for people with a level 1 processing capability. And that is their limit. And that there are people who find themselves there. And if you don't have a purpose in life, a reason to get washed, get dressed, show up somewhere, contribute the best that you can, then that leads to addictions and depression and crime. So we're all going to live in gated communities, terrified of people that we created in the first place. So that's been on my mind for a long time, which is another reason I'm so passionate about bricks and mortar. And when everyone was telling me it's all going to go online, I said, I got laughed at 15 years ago for saying, I don't think bricks and mortar are going to go anywhere, but it's how good you do bricks and mortar, what your service promise is. People are still tactile. They like to touch things. They like to commune. We're still social animals. So AI is certainly on the horizon. How do we use it? How do we use it for design? How do we use it to enhance the work that we do as opposed to replace the work that we do? And, get robots in my distribution center, but someone's got to fix them, someone's got to repair them, but they're not necessarily my pickers and packers. So what do I do with these people? If there's one thing that keeps me up at night, it's worrying about how this will play out. But we will find a way. I have great faith in the indomitable spirit of human beings who want to do good work for the right reasons. And with all of these other technological changes, there have been opportunities. So whilst we have pushed a lot of things online, it's probably only about 12 to 15% of my business, believe it or not. I've got a team full of people who have to pack that stock, pick that stock, move that stock, some of whom are doing that while they're getting ready for other things in their life, and other people because that is the contribution that they are able or want to make, or they have something else in their life that's more important. Some people are authors and musicians, and this is a really great support to their creative life. But yeah, it is a worry, and it's on my mind, but I have a belief that we'll find our way through it.
It's interesting. People talk about the online world, and retail will all go online, and bricks and mortar will disappear. And people don't think through the fact that every online store you look at is nothing more than a shop front. And unless you're selling a downloadable digital product, somebody has to put their hands on that at some point, whether it's to make it, to move it, to deliver it, drive a truck, whatever the case might be. There's a whole army of human effort going into that until we have robots and things doing that. And we're a way away from that as a total supply chain just yet. I mean, even getting things into a country and out of the country through import and export kind of duties and things like that. There's such a complexity in there. It's interesting that you probably don't think about this yourself, but you're outside of the norm of that large middle lump of business leaders that are just trying to figure out how to make the profit, right? And run the company and stay out of trouble. Now, we all actually know that there's a big chunk of those leaders. And then we tend to meet people at the upper end of the bell curve who think through some of the things that you think through and try and look at the deeper level of meaning almost under everything. You've spoken about your father, but, one of the things that I've noticed when I'm talking with people like yourself is they often have almost an intuitive set of questions they run through, confronted with almost any challenge. There was a liquidator that worked in Chicago, I think, in the 20s or something, who was asked to look after a company that was going into liquidation. And he realized it was a good business that just hadn't been managed well. And so he bought it, actually. And he sat down and he wrote 4 questions, 24 words. And he asked every manager to apply those 4 questions on every decision they had to make. And only if you get a yes on all 4 questions do you go ahead and make the decision. So the first question is it the truth? So is this thing you're dealing with based on the truth, based on fact?
The fact.
Yeah. Is it fair? Is the decision you're about to make actually fair? Because fairness is a fundamental human need. Is it beneficial to all parties? And then the last question is, will it build goodwill and better friendship? And then Rotary International adopted that and they called it the 4-way test. And so they asked every Rotarian around the world to apply that in their business thinking. And I've noticed that powerful business leaders who are driven by a focus on people often have a little series of questions they might not even be aware of, but they kind of go through them really fast. And if they could get them out and put them onto a little card and hand them to everybody in their business and go run through those 4 questions. So the upshot is he handed that card to everybody in his business and said, ask those questions every time, and the company boomed. Do you have any little mental tests or checks that you go through when you're confronted with a decision? This person doesn't seem to fit the company. Are we going to have to talk about them leaving, kiss them on the head and they can go? We've got this tough issue over here. We could make a lot of money if we just did this. Is it going to fit with the culture, etc.? Is there any little that you're consciously aware of, little series of questions you run through?
Yeah, that's interesting. First of all, I was born in Chicago, so maybe there's something about us Chicagoans. Look, when I'm making decisions about things, I guess I think about a lot of things, obviously. What's the strategy? What's the cost? What are the steps and processes? Who else needs to be involved? And what is the impact on people?
Sure.
So though I run through those 4 all the time.
Sure.
And then I run through them again. After I've rinsed it through to the people piece, I rinse it through again. And sometimes I do that in between walking from one room to another. And when you're making these decisions, you think about, well, what's best for the individual? What's best for the team that individual works with? And what's best for the company? And if it doesn't meet all of those, then we have to rethink. If it's a promotion, that person might be great, but the team they're working with will suffer. Or, we'd love to keep them. This is what it will cost. This is the impact that would have on the team. And then the business would, or if it's great for and I think too many organizations, I think this is going to be very controversial. So pardon me if I offend anyone. Too many companies promote financial leaders to CEO roles. And whilst I think great financial leaders are so important in our business, they often make decisions missing one of those quadrants. Either the who else needs to know, who else needs to be involved, what's the impact on people, or what is the long-term strategic outcome. So I'll give you an example. One of my finance team members got very excited. They'd done some work and they came and said, we're going to go cashless tomorrow. And I said, tell me why we're going to go cashless tomorrow. And they said, oh, and they get great. This is how much we'll save. This is the benefit. And I said, great. Who uses cash in our business? And they said, I don't know, but it's only 10% of our customers. And I said, so first of all, you're willing to walk away from 10% of our customers. Let's start there.
Yeah.
And then let's go back to, well, I'm in shops a lot and I do spend a lot of time in store. And I know that young people who have, got the milk run or the mowing the lawns, the babysitting, have cash. I know a lot of women in domestic violence situations use cash. The new partner doesn't want, I saw this just a couple of weeks ago. A woman was buying a pair of shoes for the kid. The new partner says you can get him something from Kmart. He was desperate for a pair of Converse. So she put the Kmart cost on the credit card and the two of them pulled the cash out to pay for the rest. I see this. I see tradies who do cashy jobs. I'm not walking away from people. And then what is the strategic impact if you get a lot of social media complaints that you've gone cashless, and particularly because it's churning for a lot of people about freedom and anonymity of purchase, etc. But that's, from a cost benefit perspective alone, there's some opportunity there if I wanted to remove cash from the business and potentially talk my 10% of my customers into paying in other ways. But that's where I think we get it wrong, Simon. I think we don't do what I would call a whole brain walk around and think about the strategic implication and the impact on people. We just use the other side of the brain, which is steps, processes, and finance.
So my question is, you've got a very clear pattern of thinking, including, is it good for the individual, good for the team, good for the, for the company, for the organization? I think the master stroke with the 4-way test that this fellow came up with was he put it in everybody's hands.
Yeah. Oh, this is in everyone's hands.
Yeah. And this is kind of a shout out to anybody in business watching this. The power of everyone understanding these are the questions I'm going to run through when you come to me with something. You may as well know them in advance and be able to answer them, right? And actually, sadly, that isn't always the case, that people know how a person in a more senior role is going to think through this and what is the alignment across the organization. Alice, we could talk all day. I'm thrilled to hear about a company like Universal Store, and it isn't really about the clothes. And
no, not for me. Not for me. We certainly have departments and teams that are really passionate about product, thank goodness.
Sure.
And we need to keep them there. But no, for me, it was an opportunity to, I always said, if I got to sit in the big chair, I wanted to create an environment that was psychologically safe, physically safe, and enjoyable, because otherwise I'm not coming.
Sure. But even for those departments that create the fashion and the clothes and everything else, it's that mother trying to buy a child a pair of shoes that the child, when you said we're really selling self-esteem, right? Businesses are seldom about the thing they sell.
Yeah, always.
They're usually always about something deeper. And then they're also about the incubator they become for the people that work there. And so do people leave as better people than when they came in, or do they leave as damaged people? I mean, that is a challenging, simple question that every executive could be asking themselves and their team. When someone comes and works here and they leave, do they leave as a better person or as a more damaged person?
Yeah.
And how are we showing up in this? Can I ask you, I just do some quick questions at the end so people might know a bit more about Alice, and then we'll wrap up. Is that okay?
Sure.
These are not about business. What's the last book you've read and loved?
It's quite funny. I read some really weird stuff. So I read a book called Why People Don't Heal and How They Can by an author named Caroline Mace recently. Fascinating, just fascinating about mind-body connection. And that was the last one I read and loved.
Okay. So what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you want to be
an actress?
An actress.
I have my three eldest sisters as singers and actresses. So that was what I wanted to do. And my dad said to me, please, 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 don't do that. I think you're the smartest one. And then I don't think he was all that thrilled when I said I had a job in a shop.
No, but you created a base in Australia that your family can come and visit and things like that. That's always a bonus. So
yeah, for sure.
Yes. And if you could have invented anything in the world, what would it have been?
Invent anything in the world, what would it be? Uh, a way to travel through time.
That's interesting.
Weird. I would love to go to places in the 20s and 30s and see what it was
Well,
like.
okay. Well, I've got another question for you. I just didn't use this one.
Okay.
If you could travel to any time in
Ah,
history, where would you go and why?
probably, oh God, this is going to be a bit dark, but Berlin in the 1930s. I think it would be, what I fear about is that we're experiencing that in the US today, that time period, and it would be, how did a country go so wrong in that period of time? I think
Sure.
I'd be really interested to experience that.
Fabulous. So I hope this has been useful to everybody listening. I think that people get what I mean when I say we could sit and chat about this with Alice for hours, because this is a conversation about modern organizations who do have to deal with, um, the leaders that are actually coming through, these really, really clever, passionate, compassionate young people. But it isn't really about leading young people at all. Teenagers are just larger versions of toddlers and children. Adults are just larger versions of teenagers, and older people are larger versions or older versions of young adults. And most people just want to hug when things aren't going right, and they want to be thanked when they've done something really, really well. And life is actually pretty simple. Somehow we lose way with that in business,
Mm.
and it's fabulous, Alice, to see a business that's successful and growing, but also meeting such a diverse range of responsibilities and so much challenge. To business leaders watching this right now is to think about how you can make your business stand for something that is so much more than the product or service that you sell into the marketplace. So Alex, thank you very much for spending this time with us. It's just been fascinating.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Lovely to meet you.
It's a pleasure.